As a practice owner, you understand that running a practice involves many responsibilities, but there are only so many hours in a day. Practice Solutions provides billing services that remove the billing tasks from your plate so that you can spend more time with your patients and grow your practice. They've assembled some of the best billers in the US to manage your eligibility checks, claim submissions, follow up, and denial management, maximizing your insurance reimbursements and improving your cash flow. They now offer solutions for private pay billing, including management of digital and physical statements, payment collections, and posting and patient aging reports. Between their services and the educational resources on their blog, Practice Solutions is your one-stop shop for all your billing needs. They're offering Practice of the Practice podcast listeners a free consultation and 15% off their first 3 months of billing. Visit practicesol.com/Joe. That's practicesol.com/Joe to schedule an appointment. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1200. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast, where we help you to build a thriving private practice you absolutely love. I am so excited to be hanging out with you today. If you've missed it, the first month of the year, we had our Even Better Year series, where we talked about small steps that you can make in the right direction to help you this year. We talked about so many interesting things. We talked about transitioning from 1099s to W-2s. We talked about non-obvious thinking. We talked about psychedelic medicine at the end of life. We talked about all sorts of different things with our guests. As a reminder, we have our memberships aimed at every single phase of practice, whether you're just starting a solo practice all the way through having a mega group practice. You're going to want to read about those over at practiceofthepractice.com/membership. Also, at the time of this recording, our group practice boss conference tickets are on sale. About half of them have sold. That's going to be in May of 2025 here in Traverse City, Michigan in beautiful springtime. It's going to be shorter 20-minute talks, sort of like TED Talk style, on very particular topics around group practice, and then lots of time for you to get to know other group practice owners. So you can read more about that over at practiceofthepractice.com/conference. So we've got a lot going on in our communities, and I am so excited to have Dr. Scott Lyons with us today. Scott is a licensed holistic psychologist, educator, and author of the book Addicted to Drama: Healing Dependency on Crisis and Chaos in Yourself and Others. He's also the host of the Gently Used Human podcast, which is a delightfully depthful and often hilarious exploration of what it is to be human, to have lived life, and come out gently used. He's also the creator of the Embody Lab, the largest online learning platform for body-based trauma therapies, and developer of somatic stress release, a holistic process of restoring biological resilience taught in over 20 countries. Scott, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thanks, Joe. So good to be here.
Yeah, you've done a lot of stuff. Like, do you ever sleep?
Once in a while. Yeah.
I'm sure you live out
for every couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, that's what's great when you're interviewing someone that's like a holistic psychologist that does all this stuff. You probably value balance in your life and have figured out how can you achieve really big things while also keeping in mind what your body and your mind thinks and needs. Yeah. So I love all that you're working on.
Thanks.
So today we're going to talk about a few different things, but wanted to start with, you've been working on, all these different areas, and we were talking a little bit before we got started, but I would love to hear a little bit about the overlap between your book, Addicted to Drama, which I love that title, the subtitle of Healing Dependency on Crisis and Chaos in Yourself and Others, and your work in your podcast and your work in the Embody Lab. How do those all fit together in regards to who you are as a professional?
Yeah, my work has always been very body-mind centered, body-based, focus, or somatics. And one of the things I recognized is that when I was in grad school, that I was working with people, and I actually found like my own propensity to stress. I was like, why am I doing another grad school program? Why am I not doing another certificate? Why am I always busy? Why am I always venting or gossiping? And for me, I tried to think about it, But the more I thought about it, the more I dismissed it. But the more I centered my focus in what was happening in my body in relation to the stress, the more I started to recognize, oh my gosh, I was craving it in this weird, bizarre way of like when there was an absence of stimulus, I would keep myself busy or even get into relationships that were roller coasters and chaotic.
Mm.
And as I started to shift my desire for how I was living life, I started recognizing, oop, I got to change something that is so habitual in me that my body's actually craving it. So that's a lot of where the book material came from, and starting to dive deep into the research about how we can actually become attached, dependent on states of stress as pain relief, as ways
Mm.
of entering into social relationships. And that was a big part of my research that, as most of us, we might have a particular focus even in our practice. But for me, that focus was still part of something larger, more holistic about how do we really dive into the research on body mind connection and how the body keeps a score, so to speak, as Bessel's book so
Hmm.
eloquently is stated. And so that was really the tie-in for me about like, okay, a podcast really gives me the opportunity to dive into broader material in addition to the material that I'm particularly interested in writing books about or research. And um and my platform was really about, okay, here's all the challenges that we're facing, all the ways we get stuck in our own stress, the ways we get stuck in our own trauma. Why aren't we healing, or why aren't our clients healing more? And I really wanted to provide the solutions. And so I created the Embody Lab as a platform. And oh my gosh, I had this intuition right before 2020 and during the pandemic to start an online platform. And it was really, this timing was just divine. And it just blew up so significantly to become one of the largest platforms for somatics and embodiment, and bringing in all my friends like Bessel van der Kolk and Peter Levine and Gabor Mate, and so many incredible rising stars in the therapeutic world as well.
Mm. I love that you point to even your own story of realizing that you were addicted to drama and that kind of chaos and crisis. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because I wouldn't have framed it that way for myself. But then,
Mm.
it's interesting. The last couple of years, I've really noticed something. And that's, about 3 years ago, I got divorced.
Yeah.
And I've
Mm.
shared this on the podcast that my daughter's mom chose to live in California and to not really, I mean, she may see them once a month if we're lucky. And so I became an unexpected single parent. There's all sorts of weird drama that came from that. But something I noticed is that we use this app called the Talking Parents app. It's aimed at co-parents, and it's sort of
Mhm.
like email only for like you and that co-parent.
Mm.
And for a while, I was noticing like every day I would check it for that like that hit of drama and of like
Yeah.
just like rage, like how
Yeah.
dare you, like you've abandoned your children, and like this self
Yeah.
righteousness that really I realized, in talking with my therapist, like just wasn't healthy. It was
Mm.
like it was positioning myself as like the greater parent, and that how like that's not how I want my like I feel like I didn't do that to my kids where they would see that, but just to like realize that I was experiencing that. And so even setting boundaries for myself
Yeah.
around like when will I check this, or if the girls are with their mom and I get a break and can hang out with my partner and not have to deal with all that goes into being a single parent. Yeah, it's probably if there's an emergency, my co-parent will text me,
Yeah.
hopefully, and it's
Yeah.
like, and so to give myself permission to say like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to talk about
Yeah.
that situation as much.
Yeah.
Um, kind of that also kind of leads me into, we don't have to get into the politics of it, but politics have become such a just rage fest, I guess, for
Mm.
lack of better words. So it's almost like people just societally on both sides of the aisle are addicted to rage against the other side. Um, as you
Mm.
enter into the Gently Used Human podcast and
Uh-huh.
you're digging into what it means to be human and be gently used, like how
Yeah.
are you thinking about those kind of things, like the micro level of what I'm dealing with, but the macro level of what society's dealing with?
Yeah. Well, I think we can really a lot of us could probably identify with your experience of like checking. Maybe we're checking the news, or maybe we're checking our phone for messages or notifications. Like we're interrupting our own like way, our thought process, looking for something that hasn't even happened, for example. And that's called, that there's a whole phenomenon in interruption science and the way we become self-propelling our own interruption, our own distraction. And that often comes when we get quote unquote bored. But I think boredom is actually part of a withdrawal process of being overstimulated, of being over inundated by stress. And one of the things that I think is really important to identify is, if we didn't do something, is it tolerable? If I didn't check and scroll through the internet that then made me compare myself to others, and then I have to talk about that or feel through that, what would happen if I backed up a little bit and said, what if I just didn't check and scroll? What if I know the world's on fire and I didn't watch the news today? What would happen? And I could come up with all these revving excuses of going, well, then I would be out of touch and I wouldn't be able to help my clients, or my friends would think I'm stupid because I'm not paying attention to what's happening. All of these things that we're actually avoiding our own regulation of our nervous system. And when we actually look under the hood, we're going, oh, I need that. There's something in me that's actually craving it. And it takes a lot of energy to back away from something that's craving, because what we're craving is the distraction from the underlying pain. We are chasing the drama to avoid our trauma, or the emptiness that's as a result from the pain and the trauma.
I love that. The drama helps us avoid our trauma.
Absolutely. If you're feeling anxious, go overschedule yourself. If you're feeling lonely, dive into and watch the news. There's these ways in which we are so fundamentally used to and even rewarded in avoiding ourselves. Even as therapists, I think one of the most, I was teaching recently at a conference, and I asked, there was with, I don't know, 800 therapists, and I said, who here entered this job because they care so much about people and they want to help and they want to support? And everyone raised their hand, of course, as would I. And I said,
I'm just picturing one guy not raising his hand. Like, no, I'm in it for the
that
money.
one guy in the back.
I'm in it for the money, but I'm in it for the
money. money. Yeah. Maybe there was that one person. I didn't see them. But then I asked, and how many of us recognize or have been in the experience of, in the process of helping other people, we have abandoned ourselves and been rewarded for it financially, or the reward of people saying, thank you, you've helped me so much. And then our tank is on empty and we go, it's not sustainable. And so I think that, unless we're attuned so delicately to our somatic system, to our body, we're not actually paying attention to these really important cues, like the way we're craving the stress, filling the void, or even giving of ourselves as a means to not be with ourselves. And, there's no blame, there's no shame in this. It's so paramount that because what we see is the greater consequence socially or politically, that we're in these divides, we're in these fights, and anger draws our attention and maintains our attention out of any of the emotions. It goes anger, then awe, then anxiety, but basically in that order. And if you can induce those feelings by posting something, then you can capture the attention of other people. And in an endemic of loneliness, who isn't looking to capture someone's attention, especially when our own attention has been robbed of us so severely by the things that are pulling us out in this urgency culture, or in this very overstimulation culture?
Yeah, I love that. It's so interesting how our podcast scheduling is often in line without even trying. 2 episodes ago, we had Eileen Smith on the show spent the whole episode about overcoming self-betrayal, times that we didn't
Mm,
listen to ourselves, that we later froze and then said, like, oh my gosh, why didn't I see that coming? And
yeah.
her whole work is around self-betrayal. And so if you're looking for a sister episode to this, 1180 with Eileen Smith, so awesome, and kind of what Scott's talking about as well, if you just want to drill into self-betrayal.
Mm.
As a therapist, I can tell you from experience that having the right EHR is an absolute lifeline. I recommend using therapy notes. They make billing, scheduling, note taking, telehealth, and e-prescribe incredibly easy. Best of all, they offer live telephone support that's available 7 days a week. You don't have to take my word for it. Do your own research and see for yourself. Therapy Notes is the #1 highest rated EHR system available today, with a 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com and on Google. All you have to do is click the link below or type promo code Joe on their website over at therapynotes.com and receive a special 2-month trial absolutely free. Again, that's therapynotes.com and use promo code Joe on the website. If you're coming from another EHR, Therapy Notes will also import your demographic data quick and easy at no cost, so you can get started right away. Trust me, don't waste any more of your time and try Therapy Notes. Just use promo code Joe at checkout. Now, Scott, what are some of the things that you've found, either through your podcast or your writing or your community, that help people overcome that? I think so many people, whether they're
Mm.
clinicians or their clients, I love how you said, what would happen if you just didn't do that? You knew the world was burning down and you just allowed yourself to step back for a bit. What are other techniques that therapists could use, or they could even use for themselves, to kind of not have drama, to just avoid that trauma?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing we have to do as practitioners and then as therapists is to recognize what is happening in our body in relation to the process of the people that we're with. So they might get highly activated and then they leave and then we see the next person. And it's more than just like, okay, I needed a little self-care. It's like, stress is contagious. It is the most contagious physiological response. The second most contagious is love. So, as practitioners, we have to really identify when someone is in the throes of their feelings and their experiences and their stress responses, so are we. And while they may or may not have a completion of that, we have to. It is so paramount that if we're getting inundated through various sessions, that we can find our own sense of completion. That might be like going for a jog, moving, physically moving our body to help metabolize and mobilize that activation in our physiology. So that's a big one, I think, for practitioners to really focus on, is really bringing in that body-based awareness, that somatics, that's going to truly save your life in the end, and certainly your sustainability of your practice. And I would say, when we have clients, one of the things I notice often is when a client goes crisis hopping. So when they go from one situation and then we process it a bit and they start to settle and they hit this sort of shelf, they hit this limit on how much stillness or even sense of safety or comfort is tolerable. And then they go into the next they go into the next situation, and you're left going, whoa, what just happened? That feels like a roller coaster where we never actually get to bottom out a little bit and sustain for a while. And that's certainly the truth of their physiology. So helping people go, can we hang out with this settling a little bit longer? I noticed that you took this deep breath. Can we take a moment just to notice how the rest of your body responds to the deepening of your breath? And notice if there's a little bit of like that wanting to jump back up into the next thing, and just know we'll get to that. But your body needs to restore first. Your body needs to recreate some energy for us to process the next thing. So like those are some ways already that we can help people start to track their own propensities for staying in the stress, staying in the drama, which, so many of us don't know. And in any addiction, those who are the addict are the last to know. And so it's a delicate process, especially with addiction to drama, because everyone, and I mean everyone I've ever worked with or taught, will say, it's not me, it's them, or it's the environment, or it's these situations. And I'll say, absolutely. And let's also take into account what is the common denominator of all those situations, of all those toxic, quote unquote, relationships you've been in. And this is not to blame you, but it is to say, how are you in relation to all of this? If we stay in the victim mentality, then we actually are staying in the trauma. We're staying in the pattern as opposed to recognizing where you do have power and choice and where you haven't in your life so far.
Mm. So awesome. Man, I'm just like thinking of all the times that, therapists may have missed those follow-up questions or, digging into those different areas. I'm
Yeah.
wondering, like, as you've done the podcast, as you've shifted out of private practice, for you, how have you personally changed to feel like, you're more embodying, the gently used human approach? Like, how has it shifted just how you enter into the world?
I think over the years, I've been willing to be more open and vulnerable in public. I think I had this way of casting myself or positioning myself as this particular professional, and really only letting people in on that of my knowledge or my wisdom or all the hard work I did, which was also like, a facade to a degree, as we all have to do to to feel like we're going to get ahead.
Hmm.
And I think over the podcast, over even the time that I've been, in relationships and really gone, oh man, oh gosh, I just wrote a book about that and repeated the same pattern. Oh my gosh. Or talk about betrayal. I was in an extraordinarily abusive relationship and I stayed over and over again going, I can help. I can make this different. I can be better. And and it's almost like, and even naming the sense that like, okay, it is a consistent and continuous journey. No matter if we're professionals, if we have knowledge, if we don't, it is hard to see ourselves. And I had no idea. I thought I had figured it out. I had no idea that I was still willing to give up pieces of my soul to walk hand in hand with somebody. And
Mhm.
that recognition was so painful, not only in my heart and my body and my soul, but also in my ego of going, I thought I knew myself. I thought I stood in my power. And so I think, to go back to your question, I think one of the things I'm much more open to is I can be both a professional and have acquired knowledge. And that doesn't mean I'm not a gently used human trying to be in the process like everyone else of just trying to feel more alive and live more
Mm.
in a place where there's possibly more ease and gentleness and compassion and kindness and resilience towards the challenges that are also part of being alive.
Mm. I know most of the focus of this episode's been around kind of the personal, the mind, body, trauma, somatic work.
Mhm.
I'd love to shift a little bit to hear about the practical side of running a membership community. We have our membership community,
Mhm.
for private practice owners. For more of the marketing side, we do a little bit of clinical work in there too.
Mhm.
But what have you enjoyed about it, and what's been maybe more of a struggle than you thought it would be?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, on the Embody Lab, we have membership, but we also do separately like workshops and trainings. So we have kind of a diverse offering in that way. And for the membership, one of the things I really wanted to offer is something that's more accessible than in time wise and financially than, let's say, a certification like we do. And so the membership really brings in these huge names, like huge names, and Cabermate, Bessel van der Kolk, like the titans of the psychology industry, so to speak. and so many incredible, again, like I said, rising, brilliant people as well. And I think, with membership, I think that there was a real craving for it a few years ago. And I think what I'm seeing amongst my friends who are trying to start memberships now is that it's much harder. It's a much more saturated market. And so, what often is the case for a lot of folks, not all of them, but at this juncture, I would say is like there's there's a way in which people want community still, which is beautiful, and there's so many different offerings. So, really differentiating yourself and identifying the value of being willing and bringing people's attention back to it, because they can sign up for a membership but not utilize it, and then they don't really feel the value of continuing it either, even though it was really not an issue of content but more an issue of time and attention.
Mm. Yeah. What ways are you getting the word out about your membership?
We do that through a lot of our YouTube channel, actually. So
Mm.
we do summits, and so the summits are free to everyone, and we offer a month free of our membership to anyone who joins the summits. We offer a discount on our certifications for anyone who's a member, and then we use sort of organic um, recordings from, like, clips from our speakers on our YouTube and other social media platforms to really highlight the value of what they could be getting, and the fact that these sessions are live with these titans and can actually be asking them questions directly.
Mm. So awesome. Well, Scott, the last question I always ask is if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
Mm. That's a great question. I would say I would ask a question back, actually, of what sustains you, and what supports you, and really diving into that. And one of the things I found when I was in private practice is I loved it, and at a point I was doing 60 sessions a week. I was just really so excited by it. And then there came to be a time where I was like, I think I'm tired. And I had to ask myself, what's sustaining me right now? And it's like, okay, well, I need to see less people, but I do need to financially be okay. And so that was a question of sustainment. And it was also like, what else do I want to do? Because I recognized that one-on-one work felt lonely to me, that I needed more community. And so I thought I started teaching more group trainings and group classes, and that was really sustaining. And also going to a little bit more group supervision. And so it was really kind of my life, and my in relation to my profession has been in constant evolution based on those questions of like, what's sustaining me now? What am I impassioned by? And how does this want to change in relation to this question, knowing that it's scary, but I actually do have some choice.
Mm. So awesome. Scott, if people want to get your book, follow your podcast, join your community, where should we send them?
Yeah. So the first website I would go to is the Embody Lab, TheEmbodylab.com. And you can find out about all the offerings we have, the directory we have, the trainings, the certificates, the workshops, really focused on embodied somatics work, which is all the rage now. And really, it's interesting. A lot of the books over the next few years, most of the books in the next 2 years coming out in the psychology world are actually body-based somatic books. And you can also find me on social media at Dr. Scott Lyons, Dr. Scott Lyons, and that's also the domain for my website, drscottlyons.com.
So awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the Practice of the Practice podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Joe, and so great to be with you and your community.
I love to see this integration between East and West thought in regards to our bodies, our minds. For so long, it's been like, you think about a college campus, and there's all these departments, these silos of information that, physics and math and psychology and the body and all these different kind of places that are just unnecessarily separated. But then, when these different areas start to overlap, we realize that the human experience is those overlaps. And so I love seeing more and more the kind of work that Scott's doing and the trainings that they're doing to help us as therapists know what's out there and know the things that maybe we never even heard about in grad school. Maybe we heard a sentence or two about in grad school, but we didn't dig in to be able to actually apply it to the work that we're doing with our clients. So I'm really excited about you connecting with Scott and going, checking out his community. Also, if you're looking to get more organized, Therapy Notes is the best EHR that's out there. Therapy Notes helps you stay organized with progress notes. If you have a group practice, you can know what's going on with your other clinicians. The billing goes through there. They even have HIPAA compliant video embedded within Therapy Notes. Just head on over to therapynotes.com. Use promo code Joe at checkout. You're going to get a couple months for free. Again, that's Joe at checkout over at therapynotes.com. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.